This next session covers matching funds. This will be a quick session to cover the basics of matching funds and how to document each category of matching funds. We'll cover some matching funds basics and then go over documenting match in the cash match, in-kind match, private match, and other state and federal match categories. Match is a portion of the project costs that are not paid by CDBG. Since CDBG is a gap financing program, the majority of projects will have some sort of match, which might include subrecipient funding, FEMA funding, or charitable donations, to name a few. We break match down into 4 categories. Cash match will be funds committed by the applicant. This includes any loan funds. In-kind match includes staff hours, equipment use, or land donations provided by the applicant. Private match covers funds committed by private entities or individuals, and other state or federal funds, of course, includes funds committed by another state or federal entity. All funding sources that will be utilized for funding a proposed project must be committed before requesting CDBG assistance. The only exception to this is a bond election. If a bond election occurs, the applicant must notify our office of the results within a week. If the bond election fails, the application will be withdrawn from consideration. Any cash match or in-kind match committed by the applicant will need to be listed in the applicant's resolution to apply. Match committed by other federal or state agencies or private entities must also be committed. Typically, this will occur via a letter of commitment. An exception would be for property owners committing required match under the demolition program. For those commitments, we recommend including the match commitment in the owner's consent form to streamline the documentation process. In general, the subrecipient's matching obligations should be expended proportionally to CDBG funds in order to ensure that the matching obligations will be met. Documentation showing match expenditures must be submitted as backup documentation with RFFs when requesting the proportional amount of CDBG funding. When a subrecipient requests a grant amendment, the matching ratio must remain the same as the original approved budget as stated on the funding approval. Our office may waive this requirement when an amendment is requesting an increase of CDBG funding. There are some exceptions here. In-kind match can be done concurrently throughout the life of a grant. We also often provide allowances when working with USDA or DNR based on their funding restrictions. To provide an allowance, the exception must be necessary for the project to best utilize all sources of funding. There must be minimal risk that CDBG funding would be deobligated or that CDBG would be the first source for cost overruns, and the subrecipient must still comply with the 3-year term of the grant agreement and federal expenditure deadline. Let's walk through an example. Here we have a $589,925 budget for the Community Facilities Activity line, with the subrecipient committing $89,925 in cash match and CDBG contributing $500,000. If we do some quick math, we see that for this line item, CDBG is contributing about 84.76% and the subrecipient is contributing about 15.24%. This is the matching ratio for this activity line. We've determined the matching ratio for the construction activity. Now let's assume we've received the first construction pay application and the contractor is requesting $47,500. To determine the amount of CDBG funds contributing to paying this invoice, we'll multiply the invoiced amount by 84.76%. To determine the amount of local funds contributing to paying this invoice, we'll multiply the invoiced amount by 15.24%. For this example, we see that for this $47,500 invoice, CDBG can contribute up to $40,261, and the local funds contribute the remainder. Some subrecipients still opt to spend all their match up front, which is fine. In that case, you could just submit all the match documentation for a specific activity with the first RFF where that activity appears. Match documentation will vary depending on the type of match, but as a good rule of thumb, prepare match documentation in a similar fashion as CDBG expenditures. We want to make sure we see the entire flow of funds from the time the need for the services or goods was identified to the time the invoice payment clears. To document cash match and private match, we want to see invoices and canceled checks coming throughout the life of the project. At the time of closeout monitoring, we'll also check your project ledger to ensure any cash match and private match is listed on the ledger. While we don't typically review contracts or purchase orders for matching funds, it's important to save those for your local records as well. For other state and federal funds, the agency typically provides some sort of summary statement at the end of a project that we use to verify their match. For DNR, you'll receive a letter summarizing the cost. For USDA, you'll receive the USDA ledger. You also need to save contracts or purchase orders, invoices, and canceled checks or proof of wire transfers to document that flow of funds. Those funds should also be identified on your project ledger. In-kind match can fall into one of three categories: labor, equipment, or land donation. In-kind labor must be documented via timesheets signed by the worker and their supervisor, showing the worker's name, dates and hours worked, rate of pay, and a description of the work conducted. For subrecipient staff, please use their regular rate of pay plus any fringe benefits to determine the hourly rate. For volunteers, please use the independent sector volunteer rate, which is currently $34.79. For equipment match, an equipment log should be maintained to show the equipment type, dates and hours used, and the applicable FEMA equipment rates. FEMA equipment rates are inclusive of all ownership costs such as depreciation, overhead, maintenance, field repairs, fuel, tires, and other costs incidental to operation, so there's no need to document those incidental costs on top of the FEMA rate. Then we have land donations, which aren't very common, but we do see them every once in a while. An example would be if a city is the primary applicant and donates land to a sub-applicant to carry out a project. In these instances, we would need to see the acquisition documentation in its entirety. The FEMA equipment rates and independent sector volunteer rates are linked here. Additionally, our matching requirements can be found in Chapter 4B of the CDBG Administrative Manual. We'll leave these links up while we open the floor for questions.